Devastation in Japan sent ripples through world financial markets, especially the stock markets here in the U.S. Now, our two economies, the Japanese and the U.S. economies, are very connected, and there are a lot of similarities. Japan's been enduring a recession for more than 10 years now, and it's made a huge government debt a looming problem for them. Joe Krier, president of Krier Wealth Management, here to talk about some of the similarities between our situations and Japan's, and the fact that we live in a global economy. And what happens half a world away happens to affect us here in our world. Joe, let's start with the fact that last night the G7 stepped in, and there was an historic agreement that was made to try and stabilize the yen and avert any further global economic fallout.
Yes, definitely, and sort of an acknowledgement of how important Japan really is to the world economy. As a result of the earthquake and tsunami, the Japanese yen had been flying all over the place, and to most of us here at home, that doesn't mean anything until we start paying a lot more for imported goods and all kinds of things start happening to the world's economy. So we had 7 nations step in together and agree that, hey, they were going to stabilize the yen at about 80 to 82 yen to the dollar.
Let's talk about the challenges that Japan faces. They faced them now for the better part of a decade. This is going to exacerbate the situation. What are some of their biggest hurdles?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Japan and go back a couple of years, and they were facing a recession that made ours look like nothing that we just went through. And if you think of the pain we just suffered, they've been stuck in this for about 13 years. And they're facing competition from Korea and China. They used to be the most efficient country on earth. They showed us how to manufacture cars, right? And they've got an aging population right now. So just like in the U.S., fewer people paying taxes versus all those receiving benefits from the government, that's a recipe for a pretty ugly situation.
And like we have here in Florida, like we have in the United States, grappling with massive government debt.
Yeah, in the U.S., our debt is equivalent to about 1 year's entire output of all goods and services produced by the U.S. In Japan, it's twice that. So relatively speaking, they've got a big problem. They've got a lot of money that they owe, and really no real solution to that other than, as we say here, kicking the can down the road.
Yeah. Let's talk about jumping these hurdles. You've got to think of this kind of like you're an athlete on the track. You jump a hurdle, and it leads to a new opportunity. How does the world step back and say, okay, we're jumping these hurdles now, and it opens the door to what for us?
Yeah, good. That's a great question, and the answer is really unknown because, there's enough things going on in the world that we know that an earthquake and a tsunami can rock a fragile recovery in the global economy. So now they're saying, wow, we still have Libya out there bubbling, and we still have European banks bubbling, and all these things are working together, and it just really has people on edge. And as you mentioned earlier, even the state of Florida's budget is a global issue. If the state of Florida has problems, our output is as big as a lot of countries around the world.
A couple of short weeks ago, before the earthquake, and today marks exactly a week since it happened, people sat back and said, trying to be optimistic here, we're 2 to 2.5 years out from economic recovery. Does this set us back even further?
It's hard to say. One positive that comes out of this is that there is going to be a lot of money printed up that actually gets infused into the Japanese economy.
But is there anything behind that money?
Well, no, there's not. But what it does is it gets people that may have been unemployed back to work, rebuilding, and we could use some construction jobs here. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of help going overseas, and that kind of thing sometimes could just get the wheels turning because that money that's made by a construction worker gets spent at the grocery store, which gets turned around and spent somewhere else, and it tends to percolate through the economy. And a lot of times that seed money can really get something going. And
if they've got to deal with a bigger nuclear issue than they've got now, that could be a big setback for Japan and the world.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to take some estimate 3 to 5 years to get all of their power grid up and running the way it should be. So you're right. The real end effect is not known, and just the uncertainty of it all right now is shaking world markets.
And we've got to be proactive instead of reactive. Joe Krier,
Definitely.
Krier Wealth Management, always a pleasure. Thanks for being here.